Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Culture Calls, a monthly podcast by Culturalytics, where we talk all about culture in organizations, why it matters, and how leaders can get to grips to it. Today, we're very pleased to welcome Gunjan Shroff. Gunjan is partner in advisory and people and change at KPMG Lower Gulf, based in Dubai. She has 15 years experience in human capital consulting, both in the public and the private sectors, in UAE, in Singapore, and in India. She focuses on organization, workforce, and talent transformations and has a particular interest in operating model design and restructuring. In addition to an MBA in human resources management, she's a qualified change practitioner, a licensed culture coach, and a certified facilitator. Gunjan and Culturalytics have actually started to do some work together using our AI-based culture analytics tool to support her culture advisory work. So welcome, Gunjan. It's great to see you here. Thanks very much for joining us. And let's start with you. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, your work at KPMG, maybe how you came to it, and what role culture is playing in it?
Sure. First, thank you very much, Clive, for inviting me for this podcast. Very pleased to be here. As you mentioned, I'm a partner in advisory at KPMG Lower Gulf, and I primarily focus on the people and change advisory services for clients in the UAE. As the name suggests, my work primarily revolves around people practices, and we work very closely with our clients to streamline operating models, workforce, talent, and reward practices, which are all in a way reflections of a culture that's promoted in an organization. So for us, the culture forms a very integral part of our design, as it really represents the appetite that our clients have for change, for growth, for towards people orientation, as well as its business priorities.
Yeah, so it's clearly culture is an important part of meeting those business priorities and those business goals, you would say.
Absolutely. It really gives direction as to, what the philosophy and where the focus is of the organization, what kind of behaviors you want to inculcate in the organization, essentially.
Right. So it's about behaviors.
Absolutely.
Um, we all know Peter Drucker's famous dictum, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I was wondering if this rings true for you in your work at KPMG and what your experience is of that.
Sure. It definitely does ring true. I mean, if I just take, our business as an example, so professional services is a very people-oriented business, right? However, a very demanding one. So people who join us are essentially hungry to grow, and they deserve great experiences. Without a culture that really puts people at its heart, one that empowers, recognizes, or simply put, allows people to thrive with a smile, it's only a matter of time that people start looking the other direction. Right. And recently, culture has become very synonymous with the word change. If you look at the pandemic, it drove really new ways of working, which became the foundation of many organizations' culture by itself, especially flexibility, right, which demonstrated and gave the perception of trust, space, respect for people's well being, safety, family matters, mental health, and without which organizations or employees would not really be able to thrive. Hence, really to ensure the sustainability of an organization or the route to which it takes to achieve its strategy, it's really essential that we inculcate a productive, happy, flexible organization culture, one that is more agile and can really adapt to the changing environment or the needs of its employees.
No, that's fascinating. You've actually mentioned a few reasons that culture is very important. One is for actually realizing an organization's strategy in terms of its objectives and where it wants to go, but also in recruitment and retention. So are you finding that that culture is a more and more important priority for employees in terms of where they work and where they want to be?
Absolutely. It I think people have become more resilient to changes, but at the same time they've also become very open to accepting what they want and what they do not want. Right. So I think opinions are very evident these days, and opinions are very clear. Especially if you look at the Gen Z, it's almost coming in, they are almost coming in, sorry, with a very clear set of priorities in organizations.
That's interesting. So to compete for the best talent,
Correct.
organizations need to create cultures that attract those people.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. Would you say in your work in the Gulf that there in UAE, are there any specific sort of issues around culture that you say that businesses or other organizations face in that particular geography?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think that in any region and in any organization, when people are not really in a position to communicate transparently with leaders, it results in a culture of fear, confusion, and does not really allow mutual respect to exist. So, lack of communication really paves the way for mistrust and assumptions in an organization and sets a precedent for the culture. So, for me, I think this is one of the key characteristics that really reflects a good or a culture that really needs some work on. Right. Secondly, I would say that embracing change or lack of the ability to really do so is a real issue that plagues organizations. If you just look at UAE as a nation, we're constantly evolving, right? And the pace of transformation has really accelerated in the past few years. So organizations really need to enhance their ability to recognize the need and the ability to embrace change in whatever form or shape, right? Today, it is in form of new skills, new ways of working, deployment of new age technology, new types of working models, and very critically, how we recognize and reward people. Right. Even during the recovery period of COVID, we can't really call it post-pandemic, but during the current recovery period, many organizations, including KPMG, in fact, launched our own flexi model policies. We have flexible, work hours, days, locations, also digital learning platforms, primarily so that we could adapt to the new ways of working and continuously enhance the skills of the employees in the organization. Right. Maybe one more that I could think of is that, we see that organizations in general are not really willing to unlearn, which is a fundamental concept in change, right? Because we've learned, if I
Interesting.
just give you an example, we've learned that topics such as, diversity, inclusion, equity are generally only relevant to groups that we think are qualified as minority. We talk about giving them opportunities, giving the diverse groups the opportunities because it's the right thing to do. But however, it actually causes a lot more perception of bias in the system, right? Even the more the bias that we're trying to move away from. So we don't really talk about creating those opportunities that really enable employees to grow on merit, irrespective of their age, gender, religious beliefs, or nationalities, and creating that culture which is inclusive to all forms of hiring, recognitions, decision making, and growth in general. Right. So what we did recently, in fact, just to give you an example, at KPMG, we really carried out certain focus group discussions, surveys within the organization to listen from the ground, what's going on and what the pulse is on this particular topic. And we launched a program called the Female Mentorship Program. This was part of our commitment to IDE in general. And essentially, it was created to create that, it was crafted to create momentum and create an ecosystem for us to just groom women in the firm as they transition from individual contributors to managerial roles and eventually leadership roles. Right. And what we realize is there's no point waiting towards the end when we want, senior, more representation at senior level. So we thought of investing more from the ground upwards, right when they're in the transitionary period as well. So in fact, this has really worked well for us to invest in how we change and learn from what's going on the ground reality, essentially.
That's really fascinating. So in a way, you're creating a program within KPMG that it probably also helps you learn for your advisory work with your clients.
Absolutely.
And working from the ground up, not just sort of the window dressing end of it, but actually building it into the system. And I liked your concept of that a big part of learning is unlearning.
Absolutely.
So in terms of to make real change, I was, in fact, you talked a bit about being in the sort of the post-pandemic or the recovery period, if you will. I was going to ask you a bit about that. Sort of in the wake of all of that, with hybrid work arrangements, virtual meetings, is this all here to stay? Or do you see it now sort of as you say, in a recovery period, do you see it morphing or shifting in some way?
I think, Clyde, that the pandemic really drove a shift in people's expectations and priorities in life, right? As we were discussing earlier, that people really now have limited tolerance to absence of fundamental flexibility, right? Or the ability for your organization to offer you what maximum support is to really ensure that there is an effective work-life integration. So in my view, I definitely see that the work culture is becoming much more agile and inclusive of people, to all demographics and expectations. Again, if I have to just give you an example of what we did recently at KPMG, we introduced a program called Rehire Her. right? Just given that we have so much of flexibility in the system now, it really helps us to actually bring back those who made an option to leave their careers at some particular time, right? Be it in form of a break or a sabbatical or a maternity leave. But the Rehire Her program actually really offers an excellent opportunity for women who've been out of the workforce for long periods of time to focus on growing their career and really transition back into the workplace. So I think that going forward, there definitely will be, some of these trends that are forefront of organizations' cultures, right? So looking at different kind of workforce, right? People opting to actually be part of the gig economy, accelerated digital transformation, and a lot of emphasis on well-being, on general mental health, on psychological safety, and also because there's so much distance in where and how people are working these days, I think a more trust-based performance management system is essentially very important, and creating then subsequently, personalized rewards and recognition programs as well. So all of these, I do believe, COVID, yes, at first it was a reaction for everybody to protect themselves to work from home, but eventually it has become a way of life now.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you're also describing it as a result that companies or organizations are having to think much more consciously about their employees, about their organizations, and about the culture that characterizes the organization. I want to turn briefly a little bit away from what we've talked a lot about, why culture is important and the kinds of things we're talking about, a little bit to the how. So, again, quoting someone, the former GE CEO Jack Welch said famously about culture that the soft stuff is the hard stuff. So how is it that leaders can get to grips with their culture? What role would you see with data and technology to help, build successful organizational cultures?
I couldn't agree more with the with that statement, right? To give an example, at KPMG, we essentially hire through the route of internships, right? There's a fundamental belief that technical work can really be taught, but you can't really teach somebody to have the right behavior, the right drive, or the attitude, right? And as important as culture is in the organization, the people who form part of that culture play an equal role in creating it, right? So if you just heard about the snowball effect, at times it just takes one person to nudge the rest of the team to act with, suspicion, caution, apprehension, and that just causes a ripple effect where people almost start believing that that is the culture of the team or an organization. So such situations are very hard to deal with, right? Even though it's a very soft matter, as rightly said. But as a leader, I guess what's important is that you need to be able to recognize the good and the not acceptable behaviors for your team or for your own organization, right? Other than recognizing, I think it's also important to question what is the right culture or behavior we really want, right? What is it that represents the organization's sense of purpose, right? Even more as the lines between work and life is actually getting more and more blurred, it's very important to consider the behaviors that really drive work-life integration, right? So, for example, I think with just appreciating or recognizing the different needs of the different dynamics of people that are in the organization, right? Similarly, what we also did internally is actually we launched a mandatory IDE training. It was a prerequisite. It is, sorry, a prerequisite to actually be part of our firm going forward. And it's our way of committing that, there is fundamental respect of all types and demographics of people in our firm, which really creates the ability to appreciate that there is uniqueness in culture, uniqueness in personal ecosystems. Not everybody has the same support system or the same situations going around at home or at work at the same period of time. And the ability to really draw into this uniqueness and integrate this into our culture, that's the behavior that we really want to drive in the organization, right? And once you understand what is it that you want to influence, it's easy to kind of get a grip on it, right? Um, I think to answer your question on technology, I think another way that we see and we actually encourage our clients to really get a hold on the culture is by looking at signs, right? Signs and symbols are a very important aspect of general culture from a design perspective as well as a roadmap perspective. And there are many signs that give it away, right? There are trends in attrition. there are exit
I see.
interviews,
Mm,
there are engagement surveys that are conducted, there is performance trends that you look at as well. So I think that today, even more so, other than the static HRIS data that we have, but the dynamic, the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning really allows us to combine the employee data with really intelligent algorithms. So it
mm,
enables, the information that's coming into the organizations to really get database insights constantly from diverse employees, right?
mm,
Because I think going forward, no longer can you drive one set of strategy for the whole organization from a employee strategy perspective. It's important that you kind of embrace that change, look at the data that's flowing in, leveraging technology essentially, and being able to customize it to the different kind of personas, because we spoke about different dynamics and different demographic of individuals in
yeah.
the organization. So, in fact, one of the things that really forms a foundation of our people and change services is to create the human centric talent strategies, right? So, it gives us information that comes in through our AI platforms, and we've stopped creating what we call as fit for purpose or one
Yeah.
size fits all kind of
Mm,
strategies, but rather it's
mm,
more from a fit for person related strategy. So that's how I
interesting.
think it's very important to
Mm,
kind of depend in a way on not only the science but also the data that comes in from organizations.
right. So data can really help because it's these a lot of complex and in some cases uh, complex sources of behavior, different behaviors, and you're putting that together with lots of other information. So the technology helps to put that all together and deal with the complexity of you say, per person relevant strategies. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, interesting. Um, I think one last thing I wanted to ask you is if you, in your experience, because you have a long experience on these subjects, are there any standout examples for you of a company or an organization that got culture right or perhaps that got it wrong?
I think I'll go back to a little bit in my past, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, I have this belief that, an organization that values its employees and their families has got the culture right, right? If I, like I was saying, if I go back to my past, I've seen Tata Group as an example, right?
Mm, mm,
Um, if I have to give you some small examples, I was part of, the terrorist attacks that took place in Bombay a
really?
very long time ago.
Wow. Wow.
And
Mm,
because it was in the Taj hotels, the kind of relief or the kind of support that was provided by the organization to their employees, not only to the employees, but also to really set up systems to help and rehabilitate the families recovering from the tragic events. It
huh,
really showcased a culture that, really became the talk of the town, right?
wow.
It's one thing when you value your employees while they are working for you, right? But it's
Yeah.
also another thing
Yeah.
to value them even
Yeah.
after they're gone, right?
Yeah.
So even
Yeah.
in the pandemic, in fact, I do remember reading about it that the group had decided to provide the last drawn salary of employees impacted by the pandemic to their family, including education of their children up to graduation. For me, that
Wow.
is really astounding,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
Most firms actually wait till the nth minute, sorry,
Yeah.
to show how much they value an employee. Like typically, in most cases, when an employee is at the verge of putting down the papers or moving for a better opportunity, but
Yeah.
it's almost like, what's the point at that stage? You've
Mm,
already created a particular perception in the employee's mind. So
yeah.
it's definitely important to show appreciation. But I think that not only do employees thrive in an environment that appreciates while you're there, but then the company automatically creates a culture that wants employees to stay and be retained without even trying too hard, right? And
Mm,
eventually that leads to a much more sustainable long-term working culture.
that's fascinating. It's an inspiring example actually from the Mumbai, the disaster there. And yeah, and I think you're saying that employees know the difference. They know
Absolutely.
when the company is committed to a positive culture for their work and for them. Great. Well, that's all really fascinating. We're kind of coming to the end of our time. Is there anything else you'd sort of like leave the audience with? You've given us an awful lot, so perhaps
Um,
that's a few
I
any other.
think I think going
That,
back to our point on being open
yeah,
to
yeah,
unlearn.
yes, yeah. I love that. I love that point. I'm going to take that away. That's great. So, okay, well, thanks very much for joining us, Gunjan. It was really fascinating, a real pleasure to talk to you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you have any questions, please get in touch, and please make sure to like our post of this video and or of the audio. So thanks very much, and thanks again, Gunjan, and we'll see you again, talk again soon.